Right. Right. I'll be talking to you about three things through the course of my speech. One, why do we allow the selling and consumption of certain things in societies, and why do we not allow the consumption of certain things in societies? Secondly, what does this headgear look like in terms of what do our alternate selves look like? But thirdly, the impacts that come out of it, right? We think that we largely live in a society, we want to live in a society where the ability of you being able to sell certain things depends largely on what side government calls the harm principle. What do I mean by that, right? We think that we go ahead and support the sale of certain things to people unless it harms people other than the people who are going ahead and using it. Which is why, and this debate is happening in liberal democracies go ahead and allow the sale of cigarettes, right? Go ahead and allow the sale of addictive video games, even though you doing those things harms the people who go ahead and do them. What are you not able to sell in liberal democracies? Things like bombs, right? Things like firearms, etc., because it harms people other than the one using them, right? To the point, why is that important? We think that it's important because liberal societies recognize the fact that individuals have certain degrees of rationality within them, and therefore we don't want to live in a paternalistic society that makes your decisions for you, right? So even if I as an individual am taking certain decisions that might not be the best decisions, I still should have the ability to take those decisions, right? One important clarification, we think that this is a headgear, you can take it off, it's not permanent, right? But what do our alternate selves look like? We think that you put the same person in different social contexts towards the evolution of understanding of how is it that those social contexts go ahead and impact you, right? Given that there's what happens in societies in terms of societies going ahead and constructing individuals, right? We think that in the neoliberal world at large, where structures dominate you, where structures construct individuals, we think that the ability of individuals to navigate those structures is restricted, is limited, right? Clarification, we're not saying that you have absolutely zero ability, but your ability to navigate those structures is limited, right? So I am able to debate here because I went to a school that taught me accented English, right? But even though the societal construction of individuals is true, we think that nobody knows this outside of people who are doing liberal arts degrees. We think that despite this idea of social construction being true, we think that most people believe individuals to have certain degrees of innate merit, to have certain degrees of inherent intrinsic ideas, right? For two broad reasons. Firstly, the idea of this culture of hyper-individualism, right? Wherein you believe that individuals are responsible for themselves in a totalizing way. We don't think it's true, but that's the belief at large, right? Because of this culture of hyper-individualism, we think that one, comparisons in status quo are pervasive, right? And therefore at all points of time, you're ingrained this idea, this habit of being compared to everybody who's out there, right? So parents want you to be the best child in the neighborhood. Your school tells you that, listen, you are the first ranker and this person got the last rank, right? This trophy indicates that I might be better than others in some way, right? At that point in time, secondly, we think that there's also pervasive ideas in meritocratic societies like ours that tell you that intelligence is innate, merit is inherent, etc. Hashtag I'm born this way to begin with, right? We think that the harm that comes out of it is manifold, right? One, when this pervasive view is believed by the people at large, one, I internalize this idea that I am stuck here because I'm innately bad. My father continuously goes ahead and blames me that, listen, you're not as good as I want you to be, and you cannot be good because you were just born this way, right? And we think that that's a massive problem. Except what happens when you have the ability to see yourselves in different situations? One, you realize that you are not the totalizing cause for your own fault, that you cannot be blamed for your own failures. For example, I am a good speaker in that world because I went to a better school. We think in the best case, one, either I'll try to better myself in whatever limited capacity I can, but even in our worst case, I'll stop blaming myself, right? But we think that our best case is likelier to happen given the fact that I recognize that I come out of this sticky idea of me continuing to blame myself and therefore exert some degree, whatever degree of limited agency I have, right? And we think that what it does is that it ruptures this worldview in terms of individuals realizing that they are largely the products of the in terms of individuals now realizing that they are largely products of social circumstances, right? What are they going to come up here and tell you? They're going to come up here and tell you that, listen, one, you will be sad compared to when you see yourself in other situations where you're doing better. What do we tell you in response to that? We tell you that given that comparison is inevitable, we think that because individuals will always exist in relationalities of societies wherein you constantly exist with others, this debate is a simple debate. On opposition, you are forced to being compared with others. On government, you compare yourself with, I compare myself with myself, whom I know to the best extent possible, right? But secondly, I compare myself with the added understanding that I am what I am because largely of what my social circumstances are and not because I am innately bad, right? But secondly, if they're gonna come up here and argue that, listen, you're gonna get into this vicious cycle where your ideas of what the real world is gonna break apart because you'll gonna get stuck with seeing better versions of yourself, we think that won't and to the extent to which your sense of reality will break down, we don't think that that's also not gonna happen for three simple reasons. One, given that on their side also you compare yourself to other people, and we think that that's also a vicious cycle. But secondly, we think that opt-out exists, right? You can go ahead and take that headgear off your face. You're not a dog who's stuck with a collar. You are a human who has the ability to make that sort of rational choice in terms of you stopping habits that are harming you, right? But thirdly, given that you have to navigate in the world at large, I can't choose to get stuck with that headgear, given that I have to earn, I feel hungry in the real world, which means that I will gonna have to get my ass off and go ahead and work to get food on my table. Very, very proud to propose.
So much for the speech. I now invite the end of your whenever you're ready.
Judges ready? I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, human beings created AI with an objective to control it. But look at us now. We are literally on the verge of being controlled by it at all points in time. I quickly want to deal with what Gov had to talk about. First, their idea about that, since a lot of things are allowed in terms of their selling, thereby it's okay for you to sell it in the very first place. The debate still happens about whether you should legalize drugs or not, irrespective of the fact that the harm is only limited to an individual being. We think so that debates then have to evaluate whether harms outweigh the benefits that they want to talk about, or vice versa at all points in time. But secondarily, the main push coming from side government is this idea about, you need to escape reality, thereby this is a way for you to emancipate yourself and stuff like that. One, insofar as you go ahead and talk about say individual comparison, I'm going to go ahead and posit that this individual comparison constantly with your own self is far worse off in comparison to you going ahead and comparing it with other human beings in status quo, primarily because this is much more proximate for you to understand, insofar as you're constantly comparing yourself with another person with yourself in different alternative realities, are likely going to gaslight yourself in terms of believing that, I am not good enough at all points in time to begin with, and thereby internalize all of those harms significantly more on their side of the house to begin with. But secondarily, we think so they necessarily have to then go ahead and prove that the harms outweigh any kinds of benefit in terms of the usage of this particular technology at all points in time. But thirdly, they just simply say that, oh, people can opt out of this technology, never tell us why that ability for people to opt out into this technology or why their ability to exercise this choice necessarily is going to manifest on their side of the house. We don't think so that people are rational enough in terms of understanding where to draw the line, where the transition necessarily go ahead and then occur. They have to prove that why is that the tipping point for people to understand where the transition necessarily then occurs to begin with. At that point in time, what does this sale essentially then look like? One, we think so this is something which is going to be significantly pushed by corporates at all points in time to begin with, primarily because corporates have invested heavily in terms of R&D formulation of this technology at all points in time. Insofar as they have heavy investments, they want ROIs at all points in time. And what does this then look like? It looks like corporates going ahead and giving insane advertisements, going ahead and nudging people, going ahead and throwing off marketing campaigns to sell this particular technology to people to begin with, in terms of going ahead and telling people how this is an immersive experience, it's an experience of lifetime, and they're missing on to a lot of things if they're not opting into this particular experience at all points in time. We think so this pushes people to have an innate desire to buy this technology at all points in time to begin with. And we think so that this push that is created by corporates lead to then people making manufactured choice on their side of the house to begin with. Why is that essentially true? One, we think so that this manufactured choice comes into construction because of 4 reasons. One, primarily because there's corporate incentive to go ahead and make people feel that there's a need that is needed for them to go ahead and complete their life if they go ahead and opt into this particular technology. But second, people generally have curiosity. They want to try out new things. They want to know what their alternate cells essentially then look like. But third, we think so that if other people buys it around you, you generally feel the need and urge to go ahead and compete with them to be the more cooler person within the social group. There's a peer pressure that is created for you to go ahead and opt into the newer things that come about within society at all points in time. But fourthly, since this is an unknown territory, you don't know what these things are likely going to be, what are the consequences of these things likely going to be. Thereby, we think so that this choice can never be informed on their side of the house to begin with, largely going to be manufactured at large to begin with. Thereby, why is this manufactured choice essentially bad in this particular regard only? One, we think so that it creates a cognitive dissonance in the minds of the human beings, primarily because it affects the way your life could be by virtue of you going ahead and having a constant comparison with your alternative realities and the interaction that you have with those alternative realities at all points in time. But second, we think so that this kind of cognitive dissonance then translates into you being more stressful and anxious in the real life, and the decisions that you make in the real life at all points in time more impacting with more arguments coming forth. But second, why are people likely going to be addicted to this particular technology? Thereby, their opt-out mechanism is necessarily out of this debate then. One, we think so that human beings are locked up into different identities arbitrarily. People don't choose to be born into a particular family. They don't choose to be a part of a particular religion, a particular community at all points in time. People generally don't have control in terms of opting into these structures within society. Insofar as when you start getting older, when you start getting to interact with a lot of information and consumption of this information necessarily happen, there's an innate rush in the minds of people to get more control, more autonomy in their life at all points in time to begin with. We think so that you want to take control over things that are around you and specifically things that affect your life and give meaning to your life at all points in time. We think so that this particular technology gives you an ability to fill the gaps, fill the answers of what your life could have been in different instances, in different ways, or different identities that you can then belong to. We think so that this now gives people the answers that they have been looking forward to, and it's a more interactive thing that people can go ahead and then engage. We think so that curiosity into human beings always exists, and thereby this is exasperated on their side of the house significantly. Thereby they constantly opt into this technology in general, and that is the reason religion comes up, or technology has come up, primarily because it gives answer to human beings. Their curiosity is pushed forward by them at all points in time. One, we think so since there are multiple universes necessarily existed within this technology, you keep on switching on to experience different alternative realities at all points in time in a hope to go ahead and find the most relatable reality that you can go ahead and resonate to. Why is that true? One, we think so that people find validation for the choices that they essentially make insofar as this is more relatable and proximate to their real life. But second, they don't feel isolated. They go ahead and feel some sense of security and comfort insofar as they are more relatable reality in general to begin with. But second, we think so that it creates a hedonic treadmill in the minds of the people. If you go ahead and like the first alternative reality, dopamine hits in your brain. You want to opt into other realities. You want to see what like possible realities then look like. You can never go ahead and meaningfully opt out. But third, people have generally like spent money on an investment. We think so they need to utilize it to the fullest extent to get ROI out of it. Thereby they're likely going to use it to their fullest extent in general. Why is this form of addiction necessarily bad? One, we think so in other forms of addiction there isn't like infinite possibilities at all points in time. There's constant switch that we keep on doing. But second, the degree of relatability is significantly more, primarily because you're going ahead and looking at your life at all points in time. But third, we think so that the diminishing marginal utility exists in other forms of like addictions that have, it doesn't happen here, primarily because different realities giving you different form of utility at all points in time. We think so that human beings dissociate from the reality. The impact of this argument then is one, you spend less and less time with your family and friends. You don't go ahead and make meaningful relationships. In tuition puppies, like you literally spend less time with smartphone addiction. We think so insofar as you start seeing alternative realities far worse off. But second, we think so you deprioritize your obligations that you essentially have within society. Why is it very difficult to find meaning in this particular form? One, we think so there's a constant competition between the real life that you have and the alternative realities that you are interacting with. You never get satisfied with the real life at all points in time. But second, even if there's an emotional void that is created on their side of the house, primarily because you wish some sense of reality to be true in the future, you never get truly happy. You never get this kind of like, there's a like series of sadness that is being created on their side of the house because of the constant comparison that is created. We think so that makes humans generally far worse off. More down.
Thank you so much for that speech. I now invite down here your PTM manager.
Viewers, after 5:30, I will try to take one, else just new. Cool. Starting in 3, 2, 1. False hope is like a hangman's noose, offering the illusion of escape, but in reality it just tightens the grip of failure. That is what they do not understand. Their entire case is this. Listen, we won't compare ourselves when there's negative consequences because you know that everything is manufactured and people are live in different contexts. But you will compare when there are good things, so you'll actually get inspired from them. So you can't use separate framings again to go ahead and outweigh, like, exacerbate the benefits and at the same time downplay the harms. If you compare on good things, you also compare on bad things. That means things like even trauma or the things like, just like feeling guilty about something that the other alternate set has done will also come about as the same consequence of their mechanism, right? I think when you have this constant comparison with the other person, primarily because they concede that constant mechanism, a constant comparison is the only way you get the rationality of why you take certain decisions or how you reach certain impacts is something that's going to be symmetric on both sides. I'm going to first break down the harm principle. It's absolutely BS. Two things. Number one, they say that when addiction doesn't harm others, it's like when things don't harm others, the sale is justified. Even cars go ahead and pollute and harm people because environment, that's how it works. Climate change, that's how it works. You still sell cars, right? You don't stop it. I don't think that harm principle is like firstly working on the sale of this item in the first place. Secondly, opt out. I think they say that you can just the harm principle means that you can always opt out. People recognize this principle. I don't know why humans have the capacity to recognize this harm principle in the first place. But even if that's true, I think the idea that you expect better and that idea that you feel that the other alternate reality, the other channel that I'll now switch to is going to give me more catharsis or more happiness. The constant sort of push that I have because there are literally infinite universes in the world and we cannot really quantify the number of which channel it will stop at. I think you just go ahead and you keep on this hedonic treadmill and the cycle just goes on that you feel that you'll get more catharsis at the end of the day in some channel or the other. But note, if the entire case is this, that you want to go ahead and feel some sort of benefit from it, I think you don't ever go ahead and stop at a particular channel because you always have this idea that the next channel might give me more and more catharsis. I think that's generally bad. That means you always go ahead and actually involve yourself in a way where you're just pressing the buttons of the next channel. That means you take away a lot of time from your actual life, right? Even if nothing stands in this debate, I think the idea where we prove that this is going to be an addiction for you because of the hedonic treadmill that human beings have, Lavanya gives you a curiosity, something that's innate to human beings. I'm not going to rehash that. But before I get into that, I think this if nothing stands, this thing stands in this debate that it's a huge opportunity cost for things that are more important to you in real life, things like your family, your friends, your education, the job you can go and do, or the kind of money you can earn to support your kids, your home, and all that. I think all these things they never engage with. I think it should stand, and I think government is too late to go and change that. I think then they say that
you will have like all choices are manufactured in life, and that's why it's fair. Okay, so make everyone drug addicts because all choices manufactured. That's not how it works, right? You want to feel in control about certain things primarily because you recognize that all choices are manufactured in life. That means since you want some sense of like identity for yourself, you want to feel that you're in control of some things, right? That's exactly why you keep on going and searching for these answers, because you feel that it goes ahead and gives you more information to make more choices about your own life. That means it sort of unlocks certain degrees of choice on our side, on their side of the house. That means when that happens, I think that people end up opting into this addiction and not opting out of it, right? But lastly, why this addiction is bad and why this addiction is like bad in and of itself, not something like drugs or something or the other things that they talk about. 3 reasons. One, the other addictions in life have diminishing marginal utilities. Even things like drugs or like internet, for that matter, you know that, or you don't opt into these things for like a big expectation of something that can give you immense happiness when you go ahead and you opt into it for a longer period of time, right? You might get like the immense sort of like thrill for the first time, but after a point it starts to become monotonous. The difference in this particular technology is that you always feel there's something that's better, because there's infinite possibilities that are possible. I don't think you ever stop because there's no diminishing marginal utility. I think each utility that you can derive from every sort of that possible reality is something that harms you immensely. But lastly, I think the idea of relatability is also more. So I don't relate to a bottle of tequila, but I do relate to my own self, which is in a different universe, right? I think the more proximate it is, the more harm it creates. I think this is something that's uniquely different from other forms of addiction. I think we proved the tipping point for you in this debate, right? But lastly, I think even in the best case scenario, if they're able to get some sort of ideas of what you could have done in possible situations that can lead to positive outcomes, I'm going to just weigh out and prove why negative consequences or experiences that you see through this other person's lens is going to outweigh the kind of benefits or outweigh the kind of positive outcome that you see. So there are positive experiences, there are negative experiences. We will tell you why this is something that sticks more with you and can harm you as a person. 3 reasons. 1, rumination. I think when you don't want sort of bad or sad things in life, I think you tend to go ahead and ruminate on negative experiences even more, because you don't want the same thing to happen to you again. Because every human being has this sort of self-preservation mechanism where they want to find things like happiness, right? So if negative things happen, they tend to stick more with you as opposed to things like this which are positive. Secondly, emotional intensity. I think negative experiences tend to have like more intense emotions like anger or sadness, which are overpowering, and you always feel you hit the rock bottom. They are more overpowering than things like happiness, because you feel that those things are fleeting, and that's why these things tend to stay with you more. But lastly, most importantly, I think the self-preservation mechanism the human beings have imbibes in them a confirmation bias for things that are happy. That means whenever there's something that negative happens to you, I think that confirmation bias feels a friction against that particular confirmation, that bias that you have towards happiness, right? That friction itself means that you always are reminded of the negative things, and you always feel that those things are something that stick with you more than happy emotions. So even if the best case scenario, if you do get comparisons and if you do start to compare yourself with the other person, I think the negative emotions will stick more, and that means things like trauma, mental health harm, and all that stuff comes into the picture. That means you tend to feel bad as an individual, because you feel that there's something that my alternate self, sure, it's not me in control, but it's something that you find relatability with. That's why you feel some sort of guilt, a second-hand guilt, if you will, from this particular person, and that's something that's bad for human beings in general. I think that at the end of the day, that makes for an unhappy individual who does not know where their identity is. I think this addiction in of itself is something that's bad, because people at all points are curious. The curiosity comes from a place where they want to feel a sense of control about the world, and in order to control the world, they want to feel make sense of the things around them. That means people at all points are largely going to be curious, and that curiosity is something that forces them into this addiction, because they always want to figure out whether there's a better reality possible for them. I think that hedonic treadmill of you finding you wanting to find a sense of relatability means that you always tend to change those channels, hoping that this happiness that I have, like even in status quo, if I'm happy, like in my actual life, you feel that it can get me more happiness if I'm viewing some other sort of reality. That means you never process emotion in status quo, you're never actually happy because you feel something is always better, but also you never able to process bad things, because if you literally find something happy on this sort of screen, I think you'd never process the kind of negative emotions that are important for individuals to process. I think for all those reasons, you are much more sad on their side of the house. As a net, you don't find your identity. All those reasons.
Can I start?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. entire debate on 4 premises. I'm going to break them down and comparative prove why we are better off. Firstly, you gaslight yourself into thinking I'm not that good. You might face trauma. You will ignore the many good things in life, right? Smartphones, Omegle, hookups, all of this can give you this, right? We don't stop any of this. We might look down on them, but we don't go ahead and say that it shouldn't exist. Thus, the burden on them is to tell you not the fact that it is addiction, but the fact that it is so bad that you will not be able to get out of it in general, right? Something that they hinge on the idea of infinite possibility. I'll break that down, right? But addiction is all pervasive in general, right? All of us have addiction, right? Human beings innately have this idea of attaching ourselves to things in general, right? Anmol is addicted to reading, right? But what is the exclusive harm of this point of addiction is something that they have to explain, right? Because reading is also endless, right? Using smartphones and being addicted to entertainment or TV shows is also something that is endless and gives you endless possibilities in the very first place, right? Will you just stop them from existing simply because of that, right? I don't think that happens, right? But what is the second premise? Corporates will make it much more appealing through advertisements because they want to sell it more, right? This premise undercuts their analysis that over time people won't learn how to use it in a better way, right? Because given that corporates need to sell it, they will take into cognizance the instances where this shit is going bad, right? What that looks like is that they'll take constant feedback and try to create discourses which aim at managing the use of it in the very first place, right? That you go ahead and use it to this extent, and the moment you go ahead and have this kind of consequences to yourself, at least try to manage that addiction in the very first place, right? Look at AI. We wanted to make it God, we wanted to make it monster, we ended up making it a professor, right? Which is to say that you were able to go ahead and derive that utilitarian benefit from ChatGPT by understanding that the moment that technology exists within a public platform, people talk about it and people try to manage that addiction in the sense that where they can use it in the best way possible, right? Premise 3, and this is very important. You will become addicted to this technology, you will get addicted to this technology, you want to get the best return of investment. I don't understand what is the tipping point for not allowing something to exist just because addiction of it exists, right? The only thing that they say is that this addiction provides infinite possibilities, right? We all use smartphones and the internet, which provides you with endless possibilities, right? Entertainment shows, texting, social media, right? They don't break it down why this is something that is necessarily different in that way, right? But secondly, the idea of diminishing marginal utility applies to anything that we consume, including perspectives, right? Even if it provides me infinite possibilities and I go through thousands of them on one day and 10,000s of them on the second day and 30,000s of the second day, and at the end of third day I realize what a stupid guy I am, that I'm wasting my life on it. You have this idea of self-introspection in the sense that I should manage my addiction of it, right? Because the moment you use it again, you consume something again and again and again, and it doesn't work out for you, you recognize the fact that you need to go ahead and limit it, right? We don't understand this imagination of a human being as a chasing dog who doesn't understand what they want or what they don't want, right? Something that I'm going to break down later on, right? The premise 4 is that it gives you catharsis, so you'll keep using it. As long as it is giving you catharsis and you keep using it, in the worst case scenario, we are also okay with it, right? Because that means that the world is a fucked up place for you to begin with, and we think we are okay with you going ahead and using that in the very first place, right? The fifth premise is that remuneration will take place, right? And in the same breath, they talk about self-preservation and how it will take place, right? The reason why human beings are differentiated from animals is because rationality dictates the idea of self-preservation and pleasure-pain principle, right? Which is to say that self-preservation principle will dictate the fact that if I am ruining my life because of this technology, over a period of time, the understanding of it is something that is going to strike, right? If I lose my friends, if I stop this activity that gives me pleasure, if it impacts my career, and people are constantly giving me feedbacks that, dude, you are fucking up, it gives you that opportunity to go ahead and introspect in the very first place, right? Something that they have to go ahead and talk about. And their last idea is in terms of manufactured consent, right? The reason why we argue that everything is manufactured consent is to undercut their analysis that, oh, this is manufactured consent, so don't allow it to exist, right? Something that we are able to go ahead and prove. But their last idea, and this is where you understand, right? The comparative is with ourselves. Comparative with ourselves versus comparative where you compare yourself constantly with others on their side of the house, right? Which is to say that on their side of the house, you still compare yourself to billions of other people on their side of the house, as opposed to on our side of the house, you compare yourself to millions of yourself, right? And the reason why that's important is the moment you compare yourself with yourself, the distinguishing factor is circumstances. And this is where you're able to distinguish the idea that, listen, and whatever I am getting, bad or good, in the other world is dependent on the circumstances to begin with. That is why you don't break yourself down thinking that why the fuck did I lose FTD finals in the very first place, right? At that point of time, let us talk about the 4 benefits that we are able to bring for ourselves. Firstly, in terms of what is the general understanding of the world, right? We are likely to break down this thinking of ourselves and others, where we believe that individuals have intrinsic strengths and weaknesses, right? Thus, this conception here is that the unique benefit that we provide on our side of the house is that you simply start perceiving and behaving with others with more empathy, right? The moment you actually realize that people are a product of their circumstances and not because of their intrinsic worth. But secondly, the unique benefit also comes from the perspective of one individual, right? I'm much less likely to blame myself for those failures which are a product of circumstances. Why is this important? Because individuals at all points of time remain confused all their lives whether a particular situation or a result was an outcome of circumstance or an outcome of their own buggery, right? The reason why you're able to realize on the other side of the house is the moment in alternative world circumstances change and your situation change, you realize that it was a product of circumstances. You break that down. But lastly, and this is very important, rationality, and they say that people are not rational enough to make these decisions, right? Rationality is a function of time. Surely we will make mistakes the moment we will start initially using this technology, but 3 things will happen. First, others giving us feedback about how we behave will make sure that we are able to introspect and understand how we should use this technology. But second, self-introspection allows you to reflect back on our experiences and try to learn from them, right? And this idea of self-introspection is something that is intrinsic to individuals and human beings at all points of time. But thirdly, principle of self-preservation. I already explained to you how over a period of time, rationality as a function of time dictates that you'll rationally try to use this technology, right? So surely I'll be addicted to it for a certain point of time, and surely it will cause me all the benefits and all the harms that they talk about, and I bite the bullet on it. We still deserve to win this debate on the idea that on a long-term metric, you'll be better able to create this individual in the very first place. But 2 principles. Harm principle. Go back to Anmol's speech, we sufficiently characterize the nature of harm principle, right? They break down this example just by the idea of breaking down the example, right? But let's revive that. The reason why you don't allow hard drugs, and this is where we tell you that it wrecks the society and harms other people in general, right? On our side of the house, we make it clear to you that this addiction is still limited to you, and over a long period of time, you're able to recover from it in general, right? But lastly, the pleasure pain principle that we tell you, and that mitigates most of their harms by telling you that you can opt out of it, right? How and why you will do it. First, you chase pleasure and you run away from pain, right? Which is to say that if this tech doesn't work out for you in the next coming 2 years, you will recognize that you should go ahead and use it less, right? But on a long-term metric, we deserve to win. What they had to do, they had to go beyond using the word infinite possibility. They had to tell you what this infinite possibility looks like and why you won't go ahead and just completely lose yourself, given that we tell you the method of self-preservation, the principle of pleasure and pain, the principle of harm, and why we deserve to.
Thank you so much for that speech. I now invite the opposition to start the series off. Here, whenever you're ready, opposition.
Will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The first thing that I'm going to prove is that how is it different from other forms of addiction? Few mechanistic reasons. A, scale of possibilities. The scale of possibilities are endless here. They say it's also endless in the internet, but because you have a degree of relatability towards your own version of yourself, we think this means that you want to have that curiosity level to explore those endless possibilities. Number 2, expectation is massive because it's literally the most important innate questions you have about different kind of realities in life. How will I be in that world? How will I be in the other world? Because it's you and it's literally your obsession with yourself. We think the most proximate thing that you actually have to yourself is yourself. What that means is that the degree to which you actually say immersed is actually very massive. But thirdly, this is a projection to your own life, because therefore the degree of curiosity actually raises to an extent rather literally seeing other people on the internet or seeing other people in real life is actually very less to begin with. But fourthly, then they say, okay, this happens with things like Omegle, etc., etc. But the reason Omegle can't be banned because there is a harm to Omegle, but there's also massive benefits of finding partner or finding a particular person. But 2, smartphone can't be banned because you literally can connect to other people, etc., etc. What this means is that even though these harms to some degree exist in other things, there are massive utilities that these other things actually give you. The question then becomes is that does this particular technology give you massive utility? Primarily because their only response to harm is, oh, this harm exists in other things as well. So, but that's not the only response that can be given. They have to explain that because the benefits are so large, therefore we can overlook the harm. Therefore the benefits have to outweigh this harm. Why does the benefit is not massive on their side? The only benefit that you get from their side side is that you realize that you're a product of circumstance and that it's not your own fault to begin with. Here are a few responses which takes the only benefit out. Response number 1. They never explain if people can internalize the cause by seeing this, rather just the effect. That is to say, people can literally feel bad about the effect primarily because people don't actually spend their time thinking about, okay, what were the cause, what were the conditioning in these other things. They can just feel jealous about the fact about these things. We think this also happens in day-to-day comparison. That is to say, if I see a particular person winning debates, even though this particular person may be a school debater, that does not mean that that still means I will feel sad about the fact, and I won't rationalize it to myself that this particular person spent more time experiencing the sadness exists. But number 2, time. If I see a particular person having tons of success with this AI, I can only, the context is you see this in real time. That means you never look into the things about the process. You never looked at the fact about what the societal conditioning was. That is to say, if I see another Robin actually having like a billionaire Robin on their side, because I'm looking at it in real time, I never looked at the 18-year-old or the 17-year-old version of Robin because I'm looking at it in real time. This means I never see the process, and their entire case was basically to see that you are a product of circumstance and that it's not your own fault. But thirdly, notice when they say your father can compare you and you become sad, now it's much more worse because now you're comparing it to your own versions. What it means is that you even feel shit here primarily because you can never other people are lucky, etc. But now it's yourself living such great lives to begin with, and that is something which you don't want. But fourthly, a peer which I asked to Pratna, which Pratna never truly responded to, that is to say, because we explained to you that there are endless possibilities, what that means is that when I'm into one possibility, I will literally move on to the next possibility, primarily because of the innate desire of knowing what's next, because there are literally infinite possibilities. The consequence of this is that I never spend the due time to each individual thing to actually understand the benefit that they give to you. To understand,
there are infinite possibilities on the internet. There are infinite possibilities in terms of reading. I also don't spend the due time in terms of understanding what other people, billions of other people are doing on the internet. Is there a difference between billions of real people versus infinite possibilities?
Yeah, billions of real people, billions of real me. When it's billions of real me, I feel a close connection to myself. I feel a close relatability to myself because I'm the most proximate person. When there are other people, it's just very difficult to know if I can live the life of other people because other people are completely different from me. Other versions are still, to some degree, there are some relatability in atoms, some relatability in experiences. This is the difference that we give to you. You never respond to that to begin with. Because you never spend the due process on each individual particular person, you never actually get to that benefit. The conclusion to the argument is pretty simple. They can't run away with this whipdom in regards to, okay, you get more empathy, you realize these things, etc. etc. Rather, even if their benefit stands, that you're a product of circumstances, why is that not good? A, you lose out the ability and the will to do anything. If you actually get the idea that everything is a product of circumstance and not my own thing, you lose out the will to do anything. It looks like hopelessness and despair. It looks like less incentive to move the social ladder because you're going to blame everything on circumstance. It literally looks like you move into that scope of vulnerability that it's the society's fault and I can do anything. We think sure, some degree of recognition is important, but if they're saying that this benefit is so important and it's giving you a massive degree of recognition, we think the will to do anything, the will to fight back actually goes out of the way. Secondly, people have an innate desire of control. That innate desire of control also ceases to exist at a point in time when you think that everything is a result of circumstance and nothing is actually in my control to begin with, right? Next, in regards to opt-out, they say if it can give you pain, then you can opt out. Here are two flips. A, because you have curiosity about different kinds of lives and it's so large by virtue of it being infinite, then Pratha's own analysis is it icks you because it keeps on icking you, therefore you actually can't opt out. But two, expectation and curiosity makes you not care about yourself, and intuition pump being, even if I lose a particular final, I don't feel good, but the thought of holding that amazing trophy makes me come back. The difference is this technology, the hedonic treadmill is so high because there's always going to be a new experience out there. This means you never actually get to that satisfaction point of literally leaving this technology, meaning you keep coming back to this technology and therefore the opt-out does not exist to begin with. Next, Pratna says the only time when you use it is that when you feel very bad. Why is this even worse? A, when you are low, the last thing you need is to see other people happy, and seeing your own version happy is literally the worst kind of thing. But number two, it can literally look like existential crisis and depression because you feel your own version of reality is bad. It doesn't give you meaning. It looks like literally thinking that, okay, like why was I born into this kind of version of reality? Because you continue to feel bad to begin with. Next, the wisdom regarding that corporates will make it good at A. This is contingent on people actually opting out, because if people are opting out, then corporates have an incentive to make it better, because we prove that people won't opt out because it's so addictive in nature. Therefore, corporates have no incentive to make it better. Dealt with the wisdom as well. But nextly, last into wing. Why do we win on certainty, right? A, we prove the likelihood of addiction. All our mech regarding return on investment on your purchase, infinite avenues, corporate incentive to advertise it that you need to fill this void means you're probably going to be addicted to a very large degree. By neglecting real life experiences bad. In reality, you move to shape your own life. You as an individual unit walks forward, whereas you see other versions of yourself moving forward. You're effectively not living your own life. But 2, utility. Reality can have good experiences and bad experiences. You directly feel those experiences. On their side, you're literally trying to get someone else's experiences and then feeling bad because you're not getting those experiences. But thirdly, the utility you get from spending time with your partner, from having a laugh with your parents, from going out to a debate tournament is massive. You lock yourself out from all these experiences because it's addictive as fuck. But 4th, you don't process emotions in real life. These emotions can be exasperated and they say because you think it can be exasperated and it's an escape. This is what Unger tells you. What is being the consequence is that your ability to live a real life ceases to exist because you don't actually get to those meaningful experiences in the very first place. Lastly, the reason we win this debate is because I explained to you that real life has much more meaning, and because it's addictive as fuck, there is no benefit to this. Therefore, harms clearly outweigh the benefit. In the end, vote. Oh, thank
Cool, judges, good. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Right off the bat, there are literally 3 whip dumps, and I don't think as judges you can go and buy that. Firstly, corporates are going to have a self-correcting mechanism. They'll sort out harms. We don't know. Firstly, even if your whip dump is there, it's not even complete because we don't know how they exactly do that. Secondly, they talk about rationality, and thirdly, they talk about empathy. I don't think these things are present in PM DPM. You can't get them those 3 things. Those 2, 3 things. 3 paths to victory for us, and they don't engage with this. Reply is too late. First, we tell you that there's an opportunity cost attached to the idea of you going ahead and opting into this technology to extent that it goes ahead and wrecks you over because the addiction mechanism is already present. That means a lot of real world harms exist to you, things like jobs, family. They'd never engage with this through 3 speeches. Second, we tell you dealing with emotions is something that they also never engage with. We tell you that there's a hedonic treadmill, so even if you are happy or sad in your real life, you always feel that there's something that's better or something that's can give you more catharsis in this real world. That false sense of hope and that curiosity imbibes in you a thing that you can't process emotions in real life. I think that's exceptionally harmful for individuals. They again don't deal with it. Thirdly, they talk about escape with escapism, and that's the only benefit they claim. I am not sure why they're able to prove why this is a unique tipping point for escapism. Even if that's true, that escapism exists, I think we tell you, and this is what we weigh out, that the escapism can lead to negative consequences also. Escapism is not an a priori benefit. It can have negative consequences. We prove by negative consequences outweigh positive consequences. Even if it's 50-50, negative consequences stick more with you because of 3 reasons we give. First is rumination, and second is emotional intensity of emotion that you feel about negative consequences. But thirdly, the kind of self-preservation that has a confirmation bias towards things like happiness. So wherever there's friction with those kind of confirmation biases, you tend to ruminate on those things even more. That means negative consequences stick with you more. That means mental health harm that you talk about, they don't engage with that at all. I think even all these 3 things, regardless of what the debate has happened, stand as an independent path to victory for us. They don't engage with this. I don't think they can win this debate after this point, right? What do we do uniquely on our side? We tell you that this addiction will happen. Don't let them slime away with examples of Omegle and Facebook and all that shit. Primarily because there are 3 reasons why this particular addiction is unique to this particular headgear. Number 1, it's relatability with the person who you are watching. You don't have relatability with everyone on the internet at that point. I don't think that this is something that's equal or analogous to that. Secondly, I think the diminishing margin utility they talk about, considering that drugs and all those kind of other addictions have diminishing margin utility because you're consuming the same thing again and again. I think this is different because it's infinite possibilities. You always hope for a better possibility. But lastly, the idea of you wait. The idea of you having a sense of expectation primarily because you've invested so much, because you want like some sort of catharsis out of this machine, I think that something is also not present when you have other forms of addiction. I am not sure why those things are something, all those criteria check like every other form of addiction. I don't think they have ever proven that, besides like literally playing example tennis with us. I think at that point of time, we proved tipping point, and why we tell you that those particular harms are something that existed in the debate. But even if those harms are not present, I don't see till this point what is the benefit of having this technology. Because once you're always curious, you're going to opt into technology. We told you why this coerced choice onto you to opt into technology, because one, corporates, but secondly, you have like the ability, your sort of hedonic treadmill that you have on things like curiosity, which is innate to human beings. I don't see why this particular harms are something that's outweighed by any benefit for that matter. Note DPM and GovWeb speech, they don't talk about the benefit of this policy at all, or why do we need this technology in the first place. Besides first speaker talking about escapism being required, I don't know why it's required, why it's always positive, and why we like to manifest it in all this positive ways. I think at that point of time, they don't give us benefits. We don't see why even those imaginary benefits that we're going to talk about in reply will outweigh the harms that we talk about, which are certain, which is one, like you losing a lot of time in the real life, but secondly, you're not being able to deal with emotions, but thirdly, you always finding some sort of like the idea that you will always feel better if you go and watch this particular thing. That means you always have constant comparisons. Mental health harm is something that they never deal with. I think for all those three metrics, we're proud to take this one on a thrashing.
Thank you so much. With that, we're off. Now, government reply will help you do that.
Starting my speech in 3-2. They lose on multiple counts. One, self-contradiction. First, they argue that negative experiences are a lot, and when you face these negative experiences, then like there'll be dissonance, etc., etc. Second breath, this like in the same breath, they argue that like people or humans have the tendency to like self-preserve, like seek pleasure. Why is this important? Because we tell you in terms of the harms versus pleasure principle that the more negative experiences I like go through or experience, I'm likely to opt out of it because I don't want that pain. I want to seek pleasure at all points of time. So if I don't like this experience, I will probably opt out of it. But two, in terms of like contradiction, right? They say like probably this person is like really curious, which is why they'll keep using it. But again, they talk about the principle of diminishing like marginal utility, which implies again a contradiction. After a certain point of time, this curiosity won't work because you'll end up like being bored of these like infinite possibilities, and you'll end up opting out regardless. But on their idea of op-whip dump, right? One, on their idea of relatability. All of this leads to one impact, that it's more addictive. But the reason why they lose is because they never tell you why this addiction is particularly bad or exclusive, right? Which means like, sure, addiction happens on both sides. People are like rational when they use internet, people are addicted to internet, but why is like not opting out of internet an exclusive harm is something that they don't necessarily prove. Why is not opting out of it is like an exclusive harm. But second, they don't prove to you that this person will probably or possibly not opt out of it. We give you like the harms versus pleasure principle in order to prove that. Multiple questions then that you need to answer. One, why comparison with self is a lot more important than comparison with others, right? We think the point at which, like the tipping point, and this is what like Robin acknowledges in terms of like trade-off, right? Like billions of me versus billions of other. We think in terms of outcome, the point at which you're able to intimately see the kind of situations you were in, the rationality that you used to opt out of those situations, or you could have used to be better in that situation in terms of outcome. There is more sense of learning for you to adapt in your real life, in that you know that maybe if this is how I like go like in my my real life, or like right now, had I done like things like the way things happen like in my alternate life, that means things could probably be better. But in terms of like massive utility, the burden that they push on us, right? We give you multiple things on like PM itself, but they don't engage. One, on the idea of escapism. We think the point at which you are in like in certain situations that you don't want to like physically or like directly deal with because you don't feel good about it, you get some sort of escapism, but also ability to deal with those situations better, because this escapism sort of like relaxes you and makes you feel better because you see like infinite possibilities and good things in general, right? But two, we tell you like you stop believing in the idea that you're innately bad, right? Because you start seeing social context, you start seeing circumstances, you see that probably because you failed in a certain situation is not because you are bad, but because the circumstances led you to that situation. Versus on a comparative, and this is where it's important to answer this question, right? What's the comparative? When you compare yourself with others, you don't know the experiences and the opportunities and the needs and like the course of their life that they necessarily had. You only see the outcome of that person or where that person is. I.e., you're probably going to compare your outcome with that person's outcome. You'll probably see everyone's rich, but you are not rich, so you are like fucked up, like you have really shitty lifestyle, etc., etc. Versus on-site government, because, and this is a concession, they concede, right, that you like a lot more proximity of personal experiences, which means you're probably going to like think that okay, this is how this certain thing led to another. You're not going to feel shitty because you know not everything is under your control, but circumstances primarily control you, right? But third, we tell you you get to analyze situations better, like in terms of like how you adapt in your real lifestyle, but etc. But like in like lastly, in terms of like end goal, what's the end goal on their side? They never tell you why comparison with so many other people is like okay. Billions of me equal to billions of like possibilities, it's symmetric, which means billions of possibilities with other people. The tipping point should then become circumstances versus outcome. Circumstances make you feel better about yourself, outcome doesn't, because you probably see it in like vacuum that this person is like incredibly good. But lastly, all their harms are short-termist, right? They tell you these harms are like short-termist, take place in short-term level. Note, we accept all those harms and we tell you why it's still okay, right? But they never tell you in terms of like how it trickles down in the long-term level. But lastly, on the idea of addiction, every time you masturbate, you like explore infinite possibilities and you feel good about it every single time. We think that's a feeling that's good. Addiction is inherently like okay, if it makes me feel good about myself, if it makes me feel bad, I'm probably likely to opt out of it because I want to avoid pain, seek pleasure. They had to do a lot of meth, they failed to do it. Incredibly proud to do it.